Taehyung woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside his window. He stretched his arms and yawned. Feeling the warmth of the morning sun on his skin. As he sat up in bed, he reached out to the empty space beside him, expecting to find Vian there, but she wasn't. Confused, Taehyung got out of bed and started searching the house. He checked the living room, the kitchen, and even the bathroom, but there was no sign of Vian. Panic started to rise in his chest as he muttered out a cuss word under his breath. He grabbed his phone, fingers trembling as he scrolled through his contacts, trying to decide who to call first. Just as he was about to dial someone's number, he heard the front door open. Taehyung rushed to the entrance and his heart dropped when he saw Vian standing there, looking almost lifeless. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her cheeks stained with tears. She looked like she hadn't slept all night, and her whole body seemed to trembling. Vian, where were you? Taehyung asked, his voice filled with worry and confusion. Vian didn't say anything. Instead, she just walked past him and collapsed on the couch. Taehyung followed her, kneeling in front of her and gently taking her hand in his. Vian, please talk to me. Where were you? Taehyung pleaded, his heart breaking at the sight of her in such a state. Before Vian could respond, a man in a suit entered the house behind her. Taehyung's eyes widened in shock as he realized it was a lawyer. Mr. Kim, I'm here on behalf of Vian, the lawyer said, his voice solemn. Taehyung's mind raced with a million thoughts as he tried to make sense of the situation. He looked at Vian, silently begging her to explain. Vian took a deep breath, trying to compose herself before speaking. Taehyung, I've been served with divorce papers, she whispered, her voice barely above a hoarse whisper. Taehyung felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. His heart shattered into a million pieces as he stared at Wyan in disbelief. He knew this would happen. He knew it all from the start. He wasn't ready, but he had no other choice. I. Taehyung managed to choke out, his voice thick with emotion. Wyan looked down at her hands, unable to meet Taehyung's gaze. I. I can't do this anymore, Taehyung. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I can't stay with the cheater, she said, tears streaming down her face. Taehyung felt a wave of pain wash over him as he realized the depth of Wyan's despair. He reached out to cup her face in his hands, gently lifting her chin so she would look at him. Wyan, do you really want this? Taehyung asked, his voice breaking with emotion. Wyan closed her eyes, tears slipping through her lashes. Yes, she whispered. Taehyung and Wyan sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the weight of their crumbling marriage heavy in the air between them. Taehyung finally broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. Fine then, Taehyung said, his voice filled with sorrow. Taehyung looked at the papers, tears streaming down his face as he realized that their once perfect world was falling apart around them. And in that moment, surrounded by heartbreak and sorrow, their eyes showing opposite emotions. Taehyung's eyes were filled with something Wyan couldn't quite put her finger on, whereas Wyan's eyes showed pure hatred mixed with grief. As Taehyung sat across from Wyan, his expression remained cold and composed, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within him. Despite his regret, he couldn't bring himself to fight for their marriage. He felt unworthy of Wyan's forgiveness and knew that signing the divorce papers was the right thing to do. Ryan, on the other hand, was struggling to hold herself together. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen. Her heart aching with every stroke of her signature on the papers, tears blurred her vision. But she refused to let them fall. She had to stay strong for herself and for the future that lay ahead. After signing the papers, Swain placed the pen down and looked up at Taehyung. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment she saw a flicker of remorse in his gaze, but it was quickly replaced by a mask of indifference. I I hope you find happiness, Taehyung, Ryan whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. Taehyung nodded silently, unable to find the words to respond. He knew he had caused irreparable damage to their relationship, and no amount of apologies could undo the pain he had inflicted on Vian. As they sat in silence, the weight of their failed marriage hung heavy in the air between them. Vian felt a surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm her, but she pushed them down, determined to maintain her composure. After a few moments, the lawyer collected the signed papers. He glanced at both Taehyung and Vian before nodding in acknowledgement and excusing himself from the room. Alone once again, Taehyung and Vian sat silence, the distance between them palpable. Vian struggled to contain her emotions, her heart breaking with each passing moment. She wanted to reach out to Taehyung to seek comfort in his arms one last time, but she knew it was futile. Taehyung finally broke the silence, his voice quiet but filled with regret. I'm sorry, Vian. I know I have hurt you beyond repair. I hope you will find someone better. Please don't hate me, he said, his eyes downcasted. Vian took a deep breath, trying to steady her trembling voice. I can never hate you, Taehyung. But this doesn't erase the pain, she replied, her words laced with sorrow. Taehyung's heart clenched at Ryan's words, knowing he did deserve it. He reached out tentatively, wanting to touch her hand but hesitating at the last moment. The distance between them felt insurmountable, a chasm that no amount of apologies could bridge. Vian stood up slowly, her movements deliberate as she gathered her belongings. She turned to face Taehyung one last time, her eyes filled with unshed tears. Goodbye, Taehyung, she whispered. Goodbye, Vian. I hope you will never see me again. She heard him say before turning and walking towards the door. Taehyung watched her go, his heart heavy with regret and longing. He wanted to call out to her, but maybe it was wrong to love her. Knowing very well that they would someday end up in a situation like this. As the door closed behind Vian, Taehyung was left alone in the empty room. Surrounded by the remnants of a love that had once been beautiful but was now shattered beyond repair. He sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he finally allowed himself to grieve for the loss of Vian and the life they could have had together. Vian walked through the crowded streets, her mind overthinking. Where would she go now? What is she going to do? All these questions came along with the pain caused by Taehyung. She was thinking and thinking until her mind went numb and her surroundings started to get hazy. Her vision got blurred as she stopped walking before getting dizzy and collapsing in the middle of the road.